So Scott Alexander named Gray Tribe offhandedly several years ago, right? He said, there's a blue and red tribe, and then you could talk about a gray tribe, right? So I'm going to use his terminology, but modify it a little bit. The most important thing about Gray Tribe is they are the best of the blues. They're defectors. Almost all the leaders of Gray are people who did extremely well within blue organizations. For example, Peter Thiel, Stanford Law, he could have been probably a Supreme Court clerk, right? Paul Graham, he could have been a Harvard professor of computer science. Larry Page, Sergey Brin, they were Stanford PhDs. They could have done very well there. Zuckerberg got a 1600. He went to Harvard. He dropped out. He rejected blue. And the college dropout, Gray, that stereotype, is somebody who could have succeeded in the blue world, but was so good that they were going gray. Okay, going gray in a good sense. There's many more examples of this. Lots of CS or biotech founders were CS or biotech professors or grad students. You have Mike Moritz, who was one of the very first journalists that became a venture capitalist. Now you have many more journos that have gone to Substack or become investors and civilized themselves in a sense as they go from blue to gray. Creators, content creators that are now finding that rather than working within Hollywood, they're going online. Okay. People who are interested in economics or monetary policy are realizing actually I can create economies and I can run monetary policy on chain. Okay. So piece by piece, we have figured out niches within Gray that appeal to the smartest blues. And we've gotten them to defect. The thing about this, like the socialist professor and the tech CEO actually have a deep psychological similarity. You know what that is? They both feel that they should be in charge.
Yeah.
Okay? That's a similarity. And the difference is the tech CEO actually is the dog that catches the car. They are put in charge of something. But they're given a budget and they're now held responsible and they can't blame somebody else. And this is why, Ben Horowitz has in his book, How Communists Became Venture Capitalists, right? And quite a few of the tech founders and so on that certainly in China, obviously communists became capitalists, but around the world, quite a few of them had parents or grandparents that were leftist or socialist revolutionaries, and now they've become capitalist revolutionaries in technology. This is why Gray is threatening to blue, because Gray is the best of blue, the defectors. And that's something where there's been a brain drain of IQ. It's a reverse of basically what happened in the early 20th century. In the early 20th century, there's something called the brain trust, okay? And all these smart people went into the US government under FDR because the centralizing state was rising, centralizing technology was rising, mass media, mass production. Since the 1950s, decentralizing technology, the transistor, the personal computer, the internet, the smartphone, means that now people have found more opportunity outside with the collapse of the Soviet Union and so on. Capitalism, technology are winning. And so that thing about the political arbitrage, you buy and then you sell, the smarter people now have a brain drain out of the federal government. And so blue is left with a husk, right, of this thing that still has a lot of scale and a lot of institutional stuff, but it's lost a lot of the IQ and the brains that made it work. So they're piloting this thing like a giant machine which has lost its pilot, and so they're crashing it into walls and so on and so forth, and they're messing things up. Like one small example, they just admitted this a few days ago, but do you see the $1 trillion budget mistake? The only thing that's interesting about this is that it's actually being admitted. Okay. Finally, the establishment is starting to admit it's not a good economy. This is similar to, how they were like, inflation is a right-wing conspiracy and it doesn't exist and so on in early 2021, right? Officials are saying, they're saying stop worrying about inflation. Inflation fear lurks, right? Powell downplays inflation risks, right? All this stuff, they were saying that, and then they completely flipped on it, right? So in the same way, they were saying, oh, the economy is good, the economy is good. And now they're admitting the economy isn't, there's weird things that are happening, right? So he's like, wait a second, we've only had higher deficits as a share of GDP in World War II, in the financial crisis, and during the coronavirus, right? And we only had larger deficit increases in those years. And he's like, in May, the deficit was projected a 1.45 trillion deficit, 4.8 trillion revenue. now looking like 2.1 trillion and 4.4. Do you know what this is? That means 600 billion more of spending and 400 billion less of revenue, which is a $1 trillion gap that manifested in 3 months. This is what I mean about the IQ has been drained from Blue. Like they basically they're not the founders of the system. They've inherited the system. They don't have the numerical people. I mean, one of the things that happened after 2021 is the guys like Reid Hoffman, who did a lot of work for Blue, many of the tech guys and finance guys in 2021 were not allowed into the Biden administration. Like there's a certain kind of center left, Larry Summers, Rahm Emanuel, Andrew Yang-ish kind of person that was still there in the Obama administration. These are people who could add and divide, subtract and multiply, right? I know that seems like a high bar, or the low bar rather, but it's actually a fairly high bar because you have folks like, Lorena Sanchez, who said that Mike Solana was a billionaire, right? Or Bernie Sanders saying millionaires and billionaires, or the New York Times editorial board member and Brian Williams, who thought that Bloomberg could get everybody, take $1 billion and divide it by the population of the US to give everybody $1 million. Like basically, those are folks who literally can't do math. They actually think that $1 billion is just a big number, right? And that Mike Solana was a billionaire. And so the bar, where you might think, oh, like people in administration, Blues are, they may not be able to do differential calculus, all right? They may not be able to, do gradient descent, but sure, they can add, multiply, subtract, and divide. They can't. They literally don't, at least some of them, like I said, these public examples where you can see they don't know the difference between billion and million. There's quite a lot of legislators who are just not, since we're not giving them a math test, we can't see just how bad they are at math. And if they're really bad at math and they're running and they have bad ideology and they're running the largest budget in world history, that's how you get $1 trillion forecasting miss. So that's what I mean about when you guys were talking earlier about, the network effects are so strong and nothing will matter. And so I'm like, I don't know about that, right? Like a lot of these things have already reversed, right? You know who is good at math? Like people who are running China and India are actually pretty good at math. And who's good at math? Grays are good at math. Blues aren't. The IQ of Blues has been drained and gone to grays, right? It's Thiel, it's Paul Graham, it's Larry Page, it's Sergey Brin, it's Zuckerberg. It's 1,000 founders who've, rather than becoming professors, have become tech founders. That was like the first wave. It's creators, rather than go to Hollywood, that are on YouTube. It is journalists who are becoming Substackers or investors and so on.